Now, just want to have you look out across the area here. The first thing that you'll notice is if you don't look at the evergreens, what you'll see is most likely leafing out of invasive plants, or perhaps flowering of those.
Well, one thing though, just to get a little bit down, when we say native, what we're talking about is a plant that theoretically has been in a particular area prior to, in our case, we would say colonization.
The American Indians.
The American Indians. So in other words, what was here without
European, mostly European.
Mostly European intervention.
Right. So we have here a box elder, Acer negundo, which is a 3-leaf type maple, which is sort of like poison ivy. When you look at it on the ground, and you look at poison ivy when you first looked out, it looks very similar to the leaf of poison ivy. And also the same thing with ash. But as it grows and expands, it will have not only 3 leaves, but 5 or maybe even 7. So these are the male flowers. The possibility you'll have plants that have both sexes on the same plant. Now, this is growing out toward the light. This is basically known as a pioneer species, which means it comes into an area, like a weedy area like this, and establishes itself. And then eventually, other trees grow up around it, and it dies off because of lack of light. Okay, take a look at this one. I hate to get explicit and so forth, but sex has happened. Take a look. Take a look. I want you to go up and look at it. Take a look at the leaves. Take a look at anything else that might be of interest. What do you see? Miniature what? You see miniature fruits. This has already been pollinated. So this is the female, that's the male. We keep them separate around here. As I mentioned, these are Osage oranges with the bark with a ropey look to them. But this plant was considered the barbed wire of the pioneers. So when you want to keep the cattle in, you grow these from seed. You know, the monkey brains, the green things that drop off in the fall. The plants are started. You've got a seedling, it's about 6 feet tall. You plant it about 6 feet apart where you want your hedge, your barrier. After it gets to be 6 feet tall, you lay it down, peg it down, and the next year what should happen is every one of these nodes, every one of these spots where you have a bud will pop up a shoot, and that's based on what's called apical dominance. So once it's lays down, it no longer has apical dominance out here. All these try to come up. They come up and bingo, you have a hedge. So when you have a young plant, it's in the juvenile stage, and there are thorns here. The ones up there don't have any thorns. So they go through a transition to the thornless stage. I'd say that most of you probably know this. Scratch the bark. Oh, you already got it. So what we're looking at is Spicebush. Lindera benzoin, Native American plant, blooms at the same time as sassafras. Now, you can see the little yellow flowers, male, female again, dioecious. And they produce a little red fruit in the fall, very similar to a elliptical, well, a cranberry type of thing. The deer do eat this, but it comes back, it flushes back. And when they get older, they get thick, they get brown, and they get ugly. You cut out the old sections and let the young sections up. I had one of the professors teaching one of my labs, and he wasn't really much of a horticulturist, he was more of a scientist. And he was cutting the young stuff and leaving the old stuff. So, I mean, the plant was like 10 feet tall, and he was encouraging it to die early. What can I tell you? Anybody ever heard of Doug Tallamy?
Yes.
Doug Tallamy now is the, as some people say, is the Silent Spring, the Rachel Carson of today. And he says oaks are right on top of the list, he's an entomologist, of keeping the world going round. This is, I believe, runs in the category of second or third. This is wild black cherry, which is, for most of us, a weed tree. Around in areas where it doesn't matter, this plant should be encouraged.
Yes.
But not in my yard.
That's why we let them grow here.
The beauty of this plant is it feeds the insects. 10 caterpillars feed the birds, especially if you open up the tents. These are the ones that, as kids, you may have used the fruit, which is about 1/4 inch, in a pea shooter. And that's also the one that stains your sheets on the line when the birds drop on there. So these are pioneer species, and that's it right there. They just pop up here and there, and once they are covered with too much shade, they'll die out. If it's in the open, they make furniture and gun stocks out of trees like this. For those of you that tend to be sensory, I need a volunteer. A victim, I mean a volunteer.
No, guys, go for it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay, I want you to come here and I want you to touch that tree. Now I want you to go over to that oak over there and touch that tree. Okay. This is called ironwood or musclewood. American native.
It's a weird tree. Now I'm like worried.
Okay, touch it. Now come back and touch this one.
Rick, what's going on?
You're getting the full experience.
Sensory.
Yeah.
Which is colder?
Oh, wow. I feel like I'm going to give you the wrong answer, but I think this one?
I think you're right.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Now, why is that? I don't know. But this is thin bark, that's thick bark. The ash right here, I think that's an ash, will also have a sort of a neutral versus a cold feeling. But thin bark trees tend to be this way. Now somebody may not believe me, so as you walk by, check it out. Now it's possible that this maple right here, not quite as cold. Now we're here with the skunk cabbage, and skunk cabbage is not a sign of spring, it's a sign of winter. In that it blooms in February with this hooded thing like a jack-in-the-pulpit, which is either purplish or green, and then it sort of disappears, and you have the next thing coming up is the foliage. And we call this, in the horticulturist circles, the hosta of the woods, because the leaves are large and sort of floppy. Now in the foreground here we have, oh by the way, I was surprised to see how far up the hill over that side and how far this is up the hill from the creek.
You have seeps.
Well, but here it's surprising because it's a little bit of a high spot.
Yeah.
Normally you find them in boggy areas. Now here we have the trout lily. Gets the speckled leaves, have that speckled look like a trout. And when I was at the far end yesterday, I found a trout lily flowering.
See this here?
It has a little flower, that's the skunk cabbage back there, and it's all back in through here, and we'll see it further down. Now, one of the signs of spring for me is the American beech. As the leaves hold on all winter, they do not upsize, they do not drop off. And in the spring, the leaves become paler and paler and paler. and when the new growth comes out, it pops off. Now, the way to tell the American beech is it has a very pointed, put your finger on that place. Well, it's like a unicorn. It's like, you know. And of course the bark is very nice. And since I was here back in the winter time, I noticed that love has happened. Again, some things raise their ugly heads. Some forlorn, lovesick man has carved initials on the tree over here. And how many people have done that when they were young? Don't raise your hand. Right through here, it looks like a little umbrella. You start to see a toad underneath it. Now, usually by the time they put up 2 stalks or branches, you will find that it will flower. And I understand that turtles eat the fruit. A little May apple, little fruit about this big. But that's one of the signs of spring when they, in May, when they have that little white flower about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. Is coming out, and really it should be called magenta bud, because the flower really is that not pink, not red or whatever. There are 40 species and cultivars of redbud. So not only does it have the zigzag, but it also has a herringbone-like pattern. You see a little bit of this here, but it's just like a fish, the bones of a fish coming off the backbone. You had a question?
I did. What is this super knobby buddy over here?
That's a swamp red maple. Some plants tend to produce these knobby protuberances. They're basically adventitious buds. So if you were to cut the plant right above that, you would find a whole flush of new shoots coming out from that point. And this is where you get the word curly maple furniture. Bird's eye furniture and things like that.
Wow.
I think we're finished basically today. That's nearly 2 hours. Anybody
I told you they'd hang in.
Anybody have any questions?
Thanks for all your knowledge. You know, it's just a tremendous amount.